Tell me what led up to your conversion, if you would, and why did you move away from Christianity or Buddhism or all of the things that you were exposed to when you were
Well,
growing up?
I was in a head-on collision and survived a car accident that the California Highway Patrol said I shouldn't have survived. And I had what they call a near-death experience. I got very interested in what happens after you die. I realized that I could have very easily transitioned. And so I was very interested in what happens after death. I actually went and met with Dr. Raymond Moody, who wrote the books on life after life. And he did a lot of the work with near-death people that had.
Can I ask you what happened in your near-death experience?
I think it was pretty classic. You know, I definitely saw I went into a very different spatial temporal state where everything went into a kind of slow motion. And it was as if the glass was just suspended in air from the crash. And then I just saw like my inception all the way up to that moment. And I just saw my whole life literally. And it was just this, as if I lived my life a second time, but in a moment. That was the experience.
What did that do for you, that experience? How did it change?
It made me, you know, at the time I was a senior in high school, my probably biggest interests were baseball and other things, but music was certainly a big interest. My family, I come from a family of musicians. So I think what it did is it made me really think about death in a very deep way. And if you've ever seen, there's a film about a man who's in a plane crash, and then he survives the plane crash. And it's a man who had a lot of fears, but he comes out of it. Jeff Bridges is the person. He's like looking at his hands and, am I alive or am I dead? I was in that state for about 2 weeks. It was a very strange state to be in. And that got me interested in what religions say about after death. And so I decided to study all the world religions just from that perspective. And the one that really, really resonated and struck me as having a very, very powerful description was the Islamic tradition. And I actually ended up, ironically, writing in the study Quran, which was published by Harper. I ended up writing the essay on death in the Quran, which is how I actually became Muslim. So it was a very interesting, serendipitous evolution.
Walk me through that. So you just about died. How old were you?
17.
Yeah, so there have been studies showing, for example, that if you have someone, I remember this study, if you have someone jump off a bungee cord watching a digital clock, the clock goes slower for them subjectively. So if you subject people to a tremendous amount of stress, then time slows down. And I suspect the neurophysiological reason for that is that when you're in a tremendous crisis, your body floods itself with the hormones and neurochemicals, probably mostly dopamine, that are necessary for you to act extraordinarily quickly. And it's extremely energy intensive to do that. So you can't do it all the time. But maybe we can snap ourselves into a psychophysiological state where we're 100 times faster than we would normally be for some very finite amount of time. And I'm not trying to, what would you say, reduce this to a physiological explanation.
Well, that's a very common reductionist approach.
Yeah. Well,
an experience that, I mean, you can look at the hard drive aspect of it, but the software is the mystery.
Yeah, I'm definitely not trying to remove the phenomenological significance, because that would be foolish. And
even those explanations are only attempts at understanding phenomenon that we really don't have access to, because cause and effect is a very difficult thing to nail down.
It certainly is, yeah. And that kind of explanation doesn't account for all the near-death experience phenomena either. But I mean,
you asked me how, that got me thinking a lot about death.
Right.
Irrespective of whatever the neurochemical phenomena that were happening within my body, that experience, that phenomenological experience, had an existential effect on me that was very powerful. And I decided that I really wanted to know if I could have died in that moment, which was very possible. I wanted to know what, if anything, happens. And if something happens, how do you prepare for that? Like what, if we're genuinely on the doors of infinity, then we should take this time that we have very seriously to prepare to go through that door. And that's what, existentially, that's what happened to me. I wanted to know if I can go through that door at any moment. As a 17-year-old, I could have done it. Now, as a 64-year-old, it's possible that I could do it today or tomorrow or the next day. What type of preparation do I need?